Scary true story number 1. My mom's doppelganger.
I have an open mind, but I don't buy into things that easily. Most things that happen, I blame on my mind, playing tricks on me, or sleep deprivation, or simply the fact that it could be a mental illness. There is one moment though, or I suppose a few moments, that have been on my mind for some time now. While I was in the shower one day, and as water poured over my head, I heard my brother yell my name. Stacy. Stacy. The second time was louder than the first, as if something was wrong. I could have sworn I heard my dog barking as well at the same time. Annoyed but concerned, I got out and cracked the door open, then called back to him, but after waiting a few seconds there was no response. I quickly dried myself off and put on my robe, then headed downstairs asking what he needed. However, I still got no response. My dog was on her bed, fast asleep, and my brother was nowhere to be found. I looked out the window, and their car wasn't even there. This wasn't the first time my mind has decided to play these annoying games, so I didn't really think much of it. I've had auditory hallucinations before, none to that degree, but maybe they're getting worse, I thought. That's my way of trying to reason with myself, and it worked. The next time that I heard my brother yell my name calling for me loudly, I thought I was genuinely going crazy. I decided to bring it up to my brother while playing Borderlands one night. We talked about our mental health a lot because our parents don't believe in therapy, so we kind of became each other's safe haven. I explained everything that's happened over the past month, and instead of giving advice or sympathizing like he usually does, he just gets really quiet for a second until he says that he's been having the same experiences as me. Except it's been our mom yelling his name, but she's never even home when it happens. He goes to check and no one's there. This was about a month ago or two, but he also thought his mind was playing tricks on him. It seemed after that talk things began to stop. I didn't hear anything for almost 3 weeks, but then something happened that I'll never forget to this very day, and I will probably never have an explanation for what it was. I was sitting in my bed, in my room scrolling through Instagram, when my mom starts aggressively calling my name from downstairs. I've never heard her voice before. It was always my brother's, so I didn't even think anything weird of it. I was about to get up and see what she wanted, when suddenly my mom burst through the door asking me what I wanted. I didn't know what to say, but I could tell that she was annoyed by the look she gave me. She asked me again what I wanted, and I just shook my head trying to understand what was going on. Then she angrily sighed and said not to yell her name while she's making dinner, and she walked out, leaving the door open. Still in shock, I got up to close the door, but as I walked across the room, my heart stopped when I came to the realization, and I immediately ran over to the window and looked at my driveway. My mom was at work, and the car wasn't even there. I locked my door to my room and jumped on my bed. Again, there was banging on my door. I sat on my bed crying as I called my brother. I was absolutely petrified and wanted to get out of the house, but couldn't even get myself to go downstairs alone, knowing that whatever that thing was out there. My brother didn't pick up as he was at work, so I was left stuck there. I ended up locking myself in my small bathroom while I waited for either my brother or my mom to get home from work, though I knew it would be hours. Thankfully, nothing else happened until my mom got back home. I told my brother that night, and he said he never had anything like that happen to him that bad. To this day, I still have no answers as to what I was hearing and seeing, but honestly, I'm writing this and sharing it to everyone just to be able to forget about it and move on.
Scary true paranormal story number 2. My childhood home.
This occurred when I was about 8 years old. My childhood home had a lot of issues with its past. A lot of deaths happened in the house prior to my family moving in. Most recently, the people that were renting it out to my mom and stepdad didn't want to live there because their son decided to opt out of life. And before that, a few murders even happened at the house. We didn't know the details, but that's what the landlord told us. I was young when my mom met my stepdad, and shortly after they met, they moved in together. My paranormal experiences didn't come until my baby sister came along, and that's when everything started. The house had 2 bedrooms, so I had to share a room with my baby sister, Rye. My little sister would never stop crying, and when I was young, I absolutely could not stand her. I remember this one night that I will never forget. She was crying for hours, and all of a sudden, she completely stopped. The room was dark, but I had a nightlight, so I could see a little around the room. I looked over, and I saw this shadowy figure hovering over her crib. It didn't move much, but when it did, it was slow and misty. I was petrified and hid under the covers until I eventually fell asleep. I told my parents the next day. They thought it was just my imagination. This happened so many more times of just waking up and seeing the figure by my sister's crib. It was nowhere else in the room. After a while of complaining about it, I ended up sleeping in my parents' room with my mom, while my stepdad slept in my room. But a lot more continued to happen. Shortly after I started seeing this figure, my stepdad lost his job. He was a hardworking man, so it really shocked my mom when it happened. He went through a rough depression because he really loved his job, and losing it must have been really hard on him. I remember him sitting on the couch all day, every day, just watching TV. One day, when I got home from school, I came in and saw him sitting on the couch, and a dark figure was standing right behind him. I remember it so clearly, just standing behind the couch. I didn't know what to do, so I just began to cry. My stepdad got up really quick and took me to the room to calm me down. When my mom came home, I told my parents that night of what I saw. Again, my stepdad seemed disinterested, but my mom seemed a little sympathetic. But no one really believed me. After that, there were a few good weeks where nothing happened, followed by weeks of this figure hanging around, usually either by Rye or my stepdad. Some nights, when I slept in my room, I'd hear a voice. It was a woman's voice. It was real deep, just talking to Rye. I never understood the words coming from it, but it terrified me every time. As Rye got older and began to walk and talk, I noticed she spent a lot more time in that room talking to her so-called friend, the dark shadow. I knew what it was. The more this figure seemed to hang around, the worse the emotions in the house got. My sister would seem to never talk to anyone else. My mom had so much anger inside of her, and my stepdad was always depressed, and I was alone all the time. Then my parents started fighting all the time, screaming things at each other. My mom hated my stepdad for not keeping down a job, and my stepdad was just a depressed mess. They seemed to fight every single night, and every night it got worse. While in my room, I even heard my stepdad telling my mom to put the knife down. But the worst time of all was when I was in the living room watching TV. It wasn't that late, maybe 8:30 p.m. or so, and my stepdad was asleep on the couch while my mom was in her room. I was starting to get tired, and I turned off the TV and walked upstairs to my room. At the top of the stairs, though, I started to hear whispering, followed by speaking back to the whispers. The door was cracked open a few inches, and I slowly walked over to look inside. Just a couple of steps away from the door, I walked over to the door, and I looked inside, and that's when I saw a figure, and that's when I could see Rye next to this figure, as if it was trying to lead her somewhere. I screamed, and instantly the door slammed by itself. I just stood there screaming and crying before my mom rushed out of the room. I just pointed at the door, unable to make out any words. She tried to open it, but it was locked. It was one of those cheaper ones, though, to where she could use her fingernail to open it. She pushed it open, and Rye was in the corner of the room facing the wall. My mom yelled at her for locking the door, even though Rye was way too short to reach the doorknob. Rye didn't have any sort of reaction on her face. After that, I fell into a small depression, along with what seemed like the rest of the family. No one talked to each other. I became the one taking care of my baby sister. Me and the strange figure I became familiar with. It even started hanging around my bed during nights when I was extra sad, and it brought me a sort of weird comfort, knowing that I wasn't alone. Eventually, my mom had enough of my dad and we left to stay with my grandparents. I remember her telling us to pack up, and as we headed to the car, I saw the figure again, standing right behind my dad. I felt sad leaving him, but at least he wouldn't truly be alone.
The Horned Creature.
Hi, I was born in 1983. Every summer I would visit my aunt's farm in South Wales. I was out in the countryside that had many acres of land with fields, forests, and streams. When I was about 6 or 7 years old, I had already spent a couple of summers there, and I knew the land quite well. I would spend 4 to 6 weeks there at a time. Because I was comfortable around the grounds, I never felt worried about exploring on my own. I would be hanging around the hay bales in the barn, or riding my mountain bike around the fields, or just generally looking around to see what I could find. But one day, it was musky and foggy outside, and also eerily silent. I was in the grassy fields next to the farmhouse. I wasn't doing anything exciting. To be honest, I can't even remember what I was doing there. Suddenly, I started hearing my name being called as clear as day. Michael, Michael, Mike. I looked around and I couldn't see anyone. Another nephew of my aunt, whose name was Nick, also lived on the farm. He's older than me, and he would always enjoy playing tricks on me whenever he got the chance. I thought it was him. I heard the voice calling out to me again. It was actually said in a manner that didn't sound panicked or menacing, but just trying to get my attention. I looked around and noticed, off in the distance, there was a horse stall, and I could see a person inside of it calling to me and waving their arms above their head, as you would expect when someone is trying to get your attention. Nick, what are you doing in there? I shouted as I started to walk towards the stall. I thought it must have been him, but from where I was standing, it didn't really look like him. It was really weird because whoever it was appeared to have horns on top of their head that curved backwards. I was quite far though, so I thought that Nick might have had a stupid hat on or something. I continued to walk closer, and as I did, the figure in the stalls seemed to fade. When I got there to the stall, it was completely empty. There was only one way a person could have gotten out, and that was directly in front of me. Not only that the horse stall was in the middle of a large field and there was nowhere they could hide, but someone had definitely been there calling out to me and waving. They had a pair of horns on their head, and I definitely saw them fading as I approached. I ran straight back to the farmhouse and found Nick and my aunt and uncle sitting at the kitchen table. I asked Nick if he had been outside calling to me, and he laughed and said, "I've been here for hours, mate." Both my aunt and uncle confirmed this. To this day, I have no explanation as to who or what that thing in the horse stall was, but it's a memory I'll never, ever forget.
True, scary, paranormal story number 2. The Cabin Entity.
On January of 2014, my former best friend Samantha invited me and 6 others to come stay at a rental cabin for her birthday. The cabin had 2 stories with 6 bedrooms and 6 bathrooms with a jacuzzi on the outside porch, so we had plenty of space. After pizza and cake, we all went outside to hang out and make talk for a while. So after about 1 hour goes by, we all go back inside. However, this time, upon entering the cabin, it felt different. Everything in my body was telling me not to be there, and I started to feel sick. There was a sinister presence lurking in our midst, circling us like vultures. I tried my best to ignore it, brushing it off as an overactive imagination. Everything was fine until the lights in the upstairs hallway suddenly went out. We were all in a group and none of us were physically close enough to the light switch to flip it. I noticed that my friend Alyssa was acting strange ever since we got back inside. She must have also felt the same dreadful presence that I did. Alyssa ended up calling her mother to come pick her up early. I never talked to her about why exactly she left that night, but the look in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. Alyssa's departure sort of broke the party's momentum, and everybody began to feel very uncomfortable. One by one, the other guests started to leave until it was only me, Samantha, and our mutual friend Chloe. While we were there alone, loud scratching sounds and random thuds began to echo throughout the old cabin. We went downstairs to see if maybe Samantha's father was messing with us, but no one was there. We decided to brush off the strange occurrences. It wasn't until about 3 a.m. we decided to head back upstairs and try to get some sleep. When we got to the top of the steps, we froze with absolute terror. A dark, thin black figure stood at the end of the hallway, and then, just as fast as it appeared, it disappeared into thin air right in front of us. We all screamed at the top of our lungs and ran into the bedroom, locking the door behind us. For some inexplicable reason, we still didn't take the hint and get the hell out of there. We grabbed some pillows and blankets and decided to sleep in the same bed, thinking that it wouldn't come for us if we were all together. Despite the unsettling feeling I had, I was still exhausted, so I ended up dozing off. But after about 5 minutes, I woke up to hear a low, menacing growl coming from the foot of the bed. I had gotten chills from head to toe. All I could do was lay there and pray that nothing would happen to us. I kept thinking, just ignore it and it will go away. I kept coaching myself to go back to sleep, but 10 minutes later, I hear the loudest growl I've ever heard in my entire life. The growl was loud enough to wake up everyone. That's when we made up our minds to get the hell out of there. We suddenly smelled a putrid stench, like a mixture of rotten eggs and sulfur. At this point, we had enough, and we decided to flee the cabin and never return.
The haunted apartment.
Hi, I used to live in a townhouse in Rosenberg, Texas, in the mid-1990s. We had an older man named Johnny who was the maintenance man, and he had a friend named Ted that would help him do the maintenance work for the townhouses. So when people would move out, Johnny and Ted would have to clean up the apartment, fix it up, and get it ready for the new occupants. Johnny would tell me that people would leave the most outrageous things behind. He claims that most people never even cleaned up the place when they left, leaving most of their valuables behind. Well, one day, Johnny the maintenance man told me that something horrible happened to him the night before. He had spent the night in one of the apartments that he was cleaning out, and he claims that he was alone in the apartment around 1 o'clock in the morning, and instead of driving back home, he decided to spend the night since there was so much work to be done. Ted, his friend that usually helps him, didn't come that night to help Johnny, so Johnny was all alone and the electricity was off. But Johnny the maintenance man had his flashlight, and he said that he had some candles with him, and he had made a small sleeping area on the carpet floor and laid down to sleep to try to get some rest before he had to wake up in a few hours to start work again. He claims in the middle of the night he was awoken by someone calling his name in the room. No one was in the room at the time. He thought it was his imagination and went back to sleep. But then he woke up again about an hour later, feeling sharp pain coming from beneath his feet. He moved the blanket from his feet, and he saw that he had red marks under his feet, as if someone was scratching his feet. He said it was really painful, and he got up and walked around the room to brush it off. He then heard a noise coming from the closet. That's when he opened the closet door, and to his surprise, there was a Ouija board on the top shelf. Whoever lived there cleaned out the whole apartment, but left the Ouija board behind. He got chills all over his body when he saw it, and quickly threw the board in the trash outside the apartment. He went back to sleep, and then was awoken a third time, feeling pain coming from his feet again, as if someone was punching the bottom of his heels. He jumped up and quickly opened the closet door to see if the board was still there. And to his surprise, even after throwing the Ouija board away, the board was in the same original spot it was in, on the closet top shelf. He got his keys as fast as he could, claiming that it felt as if he was being watched. The whole time his flashlight wasn't working anymore for some reason, and he couldn't find his candles. He had to find his way in the dark out of the apartment. And he claims while he was going down the stairs in the dark, he heard something right behind him following him down the stairs. While he was driving away, he said he saw a cloaked black figure looking out the bedroom window that he was sleeping in. He said he never went back to that apartment, and he's always stayed away from Ouija boards.
Paranormal story number 2. The Tallman bunk beds.
In Wisconsin, in early February of 1987, Alan and Debbie Tallman purchased bunk beds at a second-hand shop. They stored them in their basement, but 3 months later, in May of 1987, they moved the bunk beds upstairs to their kids' bedroom. This marked 9 months of paranormal experiences for the family that has ever been recorded. Strange occurrences began to happen nightly. The first night the bunk beds were upstairs, their oldest son went into his parents' room, claiming that his radio clock was playing music by itself and turning through different stations on its own. Alan, the father, got upset, thinking that his oldest son was being immature and just playing around, and took the radio away from him and warned him to behave. Another night, as their kids were asleep, they were awoken by something or someone crawling on the ground, portraying a dog and growling at them. Even though it was dark in the room, they could still see the outline of a dark shadow crawling in and out from underneath their bunk beds. Also, their daughter would explain that there was a fire in her room. When Alan and Debbie went to investigate, they found nothing. About a week later, one quiet night, Alan and Debbie heard their daughter screaming. When they came to see what was wrong, she claimed there was a witch with red eyes behind her bedroom door. Later that week, Alan Tallman came home from working night shift around 2 o'clock in the morning. After pulling in the driveway and getting out of his car, he began to hear howling in the wind. The wind began to pick up, and the howling got louder. He then heard a voice say, "Come here," from around the side of the house. He walked over to the side of the house, and there was nothing there. When he came back around the corner to the front of the garage, to his shock and to his horror, the garage was on fire, with flames reaching past the rooftop. He quickly went into his house to retrieve a fire extinguisher, and when he came back outside, there was no fire, nor any indication of one. He walked inside the house and closed the front door in disbelief. As he reached down to pick up his lunch kit, it was thrown across the living room by an unknown entity. There was a night where Mr. Tallman had to go to work and asked his brother Todd to stay the night with his family to protect them from whatever was haunting their house. That night, around 2 o'clock in the morning, Todd was asleep on the floor of the kid's bedroom when he was awoken by a noise he heard coming from the closet. Fog began to slowly appear out of nowhere. He then sat up and stared at the closet door as it began to slowly open. What happened next will forever be a secret that no one knows. A bright light filled the room, and Todd witnessed something truly terrifying. He screamed. With no emotion on his face, we will never know what he saw, and to this day he doesn't want to tell anyone. He never said exactly what he saw at that moment, but Debbie entered the room and began to grab her children. She asked Todd, what did he see? But he did not answer her. He slowly walked out of the room like a zombie, with no facial expressions at all. After about a minute, he then snapped out of it and began to get the rest of the kids out of the house, and they left the house that night. The family then immediately had the bunk beds crushed by a bulldozer, and not long after that, they moved out of their house hoping that the ghost or entity would never follow them ever again.